what's being valued is not necessarily the end result, but the means itself. This is the Brave Ideas Podcast, brought to you by Aqua, part of the Wonderman Network. Welcome to episode 36. Welcome to
I liked it.
Welcome to episode 36 of the Brave Ideas Podcast, the show that is all about bringing to light fresh perspectives from the worlds of digital and marketing. I'm Dan Herman. I'm a digital strategist. I'm a newlywed, and my hand swelled up to the size of a baseball from sunburn while on honeymoon. And today, I'm joined by my co-host.
I'm Esther, Head of Conversation Analytics here at Aqua, and I would rather be stuck in this small studio with my mouth taped shut with Daniel telling me his thoughts about life for 42 hours than do any more housework.
Today, we're really excited to have as our guest Rory MacRobert, Creative Director at Aqua. Rory is a board game inventor who actually enjoyed Batman vs Superman. And today, he's going to talk to us about how creatives are getting it wrong. Rory, what's new?
Daniel Herman, thank you for having me. Esther, good to see you again. Something I've been thinking about for a while. I've been doing creative advertising now for, I'm going to say, about 10 to 14 years, depending on levels of creativity. Like, I started off doing some retail stuff and then moved into the big agencies. And something that's been striking me the more and more I do it is that there seems to be an entire repertoire of tools out there that some marketers are using, but creative agencies tend to not even acknowledge that they exist. And it really kind of like strikes me as strange in that if we're in the business of talking to people on a mass scale, trying to convince them to, change their habits, relook their opinions of products, and we're avoiding these very essential tool sets. So that's where I think creatives are getting it wrong.
So if I'm understanding what you're saying, we live in this advanced marketing environment now. We've moved from this broadcast world into a much more personalized digital space where there's all these platforms and all these tools that allow us to deeply understand our consumers, and creatives are not using those tools.
I mean, to a degree. I mean, digital advertising, I've been doing digital now with you guys for the last 3 years now. Before that, I was 2 years at another agency, so 5 years of my career I've been spent in digital, which I think is a fair amount of time. And things like user journeys and remarketing and these tools really help us talk to our consumers better and better understand their habits and their lifestyles and why they're doing things and the reason behind them. But I still feel like it's actually, to be honest, I think the problem comes down in creativity versus almost like a psychology angle. In that, as a creative who works with creative teams, I've been a CD now for the last 7 years. I've had tons of people under me. And obviously I report to creators above me in the ECD format, but there's always a push to make something creative as opposed to make a communication that convinces someone to change their habits, right? So when the brief comes in, it'll be like, try and write a funny radio ad, if radio is the medium. So the creatives will obviously have the strategy and have the brief, but then try and make a creative solution to it. And the solution actually might maybe, I don't know because no one's doing it, I haven't done it, it might be lying in a more like, if you understood psychoanalysis better, you might have a way of phrasing the problem that actually touches a root in human psyche that then makes them want to buy your product or whatever it is.
Sure.
I mean, a very bad example of this is in the pricing strategies. I was reading up the other day, Harvard Business School had the study where, we all know the 999 strategy, right? We know of it. But basically, the psychology behind it is people don't like spending money. You can be a millionaire, you don't want to spend money, even if it's 10 Rand. So to help that guilt, you make your product appear cheaper than it really is. So by dropping 1 cent off your price, so as opposed to 10 Rand, you go 9.99, you will have a 25% increase in sales for dropping 1 cent on your price tag.
Sure.
Now, that is rooted in psychology and rooted in a bit of understanding what human nature is like, and it works really well with very measurable results.
So I've been thinking about this a lot as well, because on a visit to the States and watching a lot of television there, I go had the great privilege of watching advertising in a first world country. And it's actually incredibly...
Congratulations.
Yeah.
I'm so happy for you. That's
no,
amazing.
but this is why that for me was shocking, because of the level of what we would deem non-creativity that's essentially used in that kind of advertising, television advertising, right? So, for instance, you're watching an ad on a medication that's used to keep your stomach regular. Let's just go right there. Okay. So then the entire ad is about how Susie is using this now and she's super regular. First of all, it goes, if you don't use this, your stomach is going to be a mess. Susie uses this. She's super regular. Buy it. Okay, so the whole thing is fear-based, and then in terms of the psychology, first we hit you with fear about your body, then we hit you with a testimonial from your friend, and then we say buy it.
Which obviously then builds association and go, well, if it's good enough for her, it's good enough for me.
Exactly, that whole thing. Then, at the end of the ad, because of American laws and bans and etc., and everything that you can be sued for as well, at the end of the ad it goes, don't use this if you have the following contraindications, or like if you have these symptoms, or they have to list everything. That's their ad. That's how they've packaged it. They've put all the important information in, and people go out and buy the meds. Here in South Africa, we still have Hallmark, and it still works. People watch it and they buy. So what I've really been thinking about behind this is the strategy behind what we're trying to sell still more important than the creative output? So in terms of knowing the psychology behind it, let's just use a blatant fear tactic. Or is it still really important for us to introduce that creativity? And then as an agency, are we too scared to tap into the adverse because we feel that we'll stop being creative?
Yeah, let me add to that. The first thing I want to say is it's the first time I've ever heard anyone talk about bowel movements on the Brave Ideas podcast. Clearly been locked in a house, right? But I think that for me, the interesting thing, and I just going back to what Rory said and also what you said, is this distinction we're drawing between effective advertising and creative advertising. Yeah. And what I'm interpreting as Rory's thesis here is that creatives are getting it wrong, because they don't see the distinction anymore between what's effective and what's creative. What's being valued is not necessarily the end result, but the means itself.
100%. That is a very succinct summary of how I feel. I mean, as a very shallow example, if you look at the advertising awards industry, which is obviously massive, it's like Cannes, Lurie's, One Show, all these things. There are other awards out there, the Effies, the Assegais. These are award shows that actually promote good advertising. Hey, we did this thing and it did really well, right? And yet they are seen as like the Hunchback of Notre Dame. Like no one really wants to bring Quasimodo into their house and no one really wants to win an Effie. I mean, clients want to win an Effie because it proves that their marketing is working. Yeah. Advertisers don't really. Advertisers want to win a Lurie, which now brands itself as a creative award as opposed to an advertising award. And that's, and it's needed, like obviously things like craft and skill and, like hiring an art director to do a beautiful piece of art direction is needed. But if you take one step back, we are advertising and our point is to advertise things.
Yes.
Then surely the prominent awards should be advertising awards. We sold a lot of stuff by doing really good stuff.
Sure.
That's a mindset imbalance at the moment where, to Dan's point, people are awarding and how'd you put it so eloquently?
Confusing the creative for effective.
Yes, exactly. The means to the ends.
Yeah. What is creative effectiveness anyway? Like I think that for me, like I've been thinking a lot about this actually in the last couple of days, because it's hard to understand as someone working in the industry what the industry actually values.
Sure.
It's based on what you see sitting at your desk in an agency and following media publications, whatever. Because what you see the industry value and what you see agencies value is the creative awards, right? You see them. That's what you see them value, and whether those things changed lives or made an impact or sold products is almost secondary to what it looked like, what it felt like. I don't know what it smelled like. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's this sensory thing that we're putting on to what we do that is cool, but that appeals to us and almost us alone. And what I would kind of challenge is, where does the consumer fit in here? And are we making the right kind of decision by valuing our own perception of what constitutes advertising beauty versus what actually matters to our clients and to the people that we're talking to,
and works with the consumers, like what actually registers with the people that we're advertising towards. Now, don't get me wrong, like creativity does work. Okay.
Yeah.
Like, again, another Harvard Business School study. The goal was to see whether creative advertising sold more product than non-creative advertising. And overall, for every dollar spent in a creative advert, you got twice the value out of it to every dollar spent in a non-creative advert. That was the outtake. So creativity did work. But the difference here, the point that they made was it's the right kind of creativity for the right kind of product and the right kind of consumer.
Sure.
Okay. So currently, they had a whole list of creativity. So it was things like elaboration, things like originality, things like artistic value. Originality is kind of where the advertising industry sits at the moment. Got to be original. You know, like every time you make a TV ad, it's got to be a brand new TV ad that no one's ever seen before, because that's what advertising is. Except that was the third best functioning, middle. Number 3. It was number 3 on the list of what creativity actually worked. Number 1 was elaboration. So adverts that took your product and then elaborated further, creatively so, on how it worked or how it benefited you. And I think an example there is the DirecTV in America, where the whole thing is, you know, when you get cable, you get angry. When you get angry, your daughter gets angry. When your daughter gets angry, she's kicked out of school. And then they had a very creative storyline after that, but massive engagement and massive sort of results because of that. Whereas our current focus to try and create something no one's ever created before only came third on the list. So, I mean, already just acknowledging that is a good step in the right direction.
What I'm hearing you say is that the thing at the top of the list when it comes to creative advertising, I guess, is that it's got to answer to some kind of human truth before it does the fact that it is the best, you know, camera angle that's ever been used on a car advert. But what I actually heard you speaking about recently, Rory, was how brands and companies are waking up to this and they're going, okay, great, we're spending millions on very rad advertising. But is this actually, like, are the agencies that are doing the work for us adding to our bottom line? And so we're seeing big companies, big brands now saying, okay, we will employ you and pay you out based on what you're able to produce for us in terms of sales.
I see McDonald's now internationally has made a decision that they will pay a basic retainer to keep agency, the sort of nominal staff going, and then any money over that is going to be rewarded on success of campaign. And I think that's going to fundamentally shift how the agencies start to look at work, because spending, I'm going to say, 5 million rand on a TV ad that has a 0.2 increase of sales, a real sort of result, is no longer going to be seen as viable. And I mean, I know that's very boring. I know it's very corporate.
Sure.
But advertising is very corporate.
Yeah.
We literally are dealing with corporates on a daily basis. So I think that's the kind of reality that needs to be understood. And I think that sort of thing is going to fundamentally change businesses. And also with that, the increase of big brands like Woolworths and Pick n Pay and Mr. Price, the really sort of big guys, bringing in their own advertising firms in-house is also going to change how those guys do advertising, because I feel it's going to be a lot more branding orientated, so a lot more retail but done in a certain brand style, and then with much fewer traditional advertising techniques, because maybe it's not bringing in as much income as advertising firms would like to say it does.
What I find quite interesting about what you're saying, referencing the businesses shifting towards a rewards-based approach, referencing clients building their own internal agencies or even creating hubs that are run by agencies, whatever, is that definitely there's clients are looking to control the output.
Yeah.
And what actually frightens me about that, as someone who works in a creative agency, is that actually what that could result to is, as you say, it's quite corporate, could result in the deadening of creative thinking. Just on the fact that it is become so micromanaged, it is so controlled, it is so effectiveness-driven, as opposed to creative-driven. Would Pick n Pay be entering the lorries? But I'm just trying to understand the role that creative agencies are now going to play in the context where clients and businesses and consumers themselves are really taking control of marketing. Are we literally living a lie at the moment?
Okay, can I quickly tell you a brief history of advertising as to how I know it? No, it's important.
Yeah.
It's important.
That's
It's important.
Cool. That's cool.
Okay, so and then at the end of the story, I'll have an answer for your question.
I hope so.
Okay, I'll keep it short. So advertising's been around since people have been selling things. I mean, like, it's as old as trade is, and until quite recently, it's been quite. If you want a chicken, look, I have a chicken. And then as communication changed, so printing press, so posters became available, books became available, it fundamentally didn't change that much. I think stylistically it mimicked the art of the time. So posters until quite recently were actually quite beautiful. Billboards were more artistic than they were marketing because like people knew a thing on the wall to be beautiful as opposed to educational. And then things like the newspaper and the mass printing, that changed a lot. So suddenly it became very, very like, buy Tom's pills, they will solve your hair problems. So I think there was a time when they were quite functional, and then there was a bit of experimenting in style. And then what happened in the 60s or the 40s, 50s, 60s, depending how you see things, is like the golden age of advertising. So until that point, advertising agencies, they existed, but there were more media shops as we know them. So as a company, they would buy space in newspapers, and then they would then sell the space to clients. The clients would still be doing their own advertising. So the person selling the product was the person advertising anyway. No sort of real psychology thought behind it at all. Like, I have pills, come buy them. So then in the 40s, 50s, 60s, the golden age came up, and the agencies started to create and generate the actual advertising themselves. And that's when new techniques like elaboration, exaggeration, metaphors, storytelling, brand building started happening for the first time. Where if you made a funny ad that necessarily wasn't about your product, but it was funny, those started to sell better and do better than traditional, like, I have pills, come buy my pills. Because I think back then it was new, it was fresh, no one had seen that before. TV adverts became content pieces where you used to like look forward to the adverts because they were funny or they were like sort of mini films, and it worked really, really well. And I think what's happened is after that point in time, that's been the dream. When that new ground is broken, advertising has kind of wanted to stay there since the 60s, where you have people referring to the adverts as films. It's a flipping advert, guys. Yeah. It's not a film. Yeah. It's an advert, right? But they still do, to this day. You work with the guys who are like, my film is being made. That's where, Dan, this is getting to your point. I think the guys have been living that dream for the last couple of decades. Yeah. And something else that agencies don't talk about nowadays is at that time as well, there was actually a concurrent branch of advertising where guys like Edward Bernays, if you guys have heard of him before, he was the nephew of Sigmund Freud, the grandfather of PR and propaganda, as he's known, right? And this guy applied crowd psychology and psychoanalytical thoughts to how he promoted his products and his clients' products, right? Mm. There were creative executions, but the problem was, we need to... Lucky Strike came to him. They were like, women smoking cigarettes in public is taboo. That is our problem. Solve that problem for us. And what he didn't do was he didn't make a TV ad that had women smoking in public. He didn't go and write a funny radio ad that had people laughing and then going, maybe I should smoke in public. What he did was he held at the Freedom Fair that year, he basically got Lucky Strike to sponsor the entire thing, and then he had a whole bunch of women from different categories or classes and lifestyle, and they walked, and they stopped in front of the press, and they pulled out their cigarettes and they smoked as a rebellion. Because at the time, it was frowned upon. It was like being nude in public, like you don't do it. And here you had like 100 women smoking in front of the press, and the people went crazy. Like it was a clear rebellion, and it changed overnight how women were seen. So if you're a woman and you wanted to be proud and individualistic and a feminist, you smoked in public.
So what I'm getting from that and what's going on in my mind is that possibly what's happened a lot is that creative directors or whatever have been brought in from creative perspective. So for instance, if you're the best filmmaker, please make my TV ad. Are we moving to a space where we're not anymore just bringing in creatives to do creative work, but we actually want to work with advertising specialists who are creative?
Exactly that. In my opinion, that is where the future of advertising lies, and why things like going in-house are not necessarily a terrible thing, because if advertisers become true experts in what they do, so understanding that, cool, I have 5 million rand maybe I shouldn't make a TV ad because it's fun. And what I should normally do, maybe I should hold a parade for free. This is obviously an old idea and wouldn't work nowadays. But at the time, it was groundbreaking and revolutionary. So, like, having that ability to actually look at what you have to do and then choose the more effective route will make you an advertising leader.
So I hear that, and I think that it's great. We're talking about an industry where people need to sit advertising specialists with creative skill sets, but that doesn't change what Rory said, right? That people are still living in the 60s archetype of what advertising consists of, and that the industry is ostensibly run by graphic designers and writers who are looking to create art through advertising. That's why they call adverts films, because they're ostensibly artists who have found advertising as a mechanism to add value to their client.
Exactly.
Because what you're saying, Rory, is that actually it poses an existential question to the creative mindset that currently exists in the industry today. And so my question to you is, what do we need to start to do to drive a shift, to move from artists in advertising to advertising specialists who can do art?
I think if you were to do a rehaul of the industry, you would have to start at the colleges, at the universities. I did copywriting as a diploma, which wasn't a problem. I learned how to write, which is a good thing. I think there should have been a lot more techniques, consumer insight, sort of crowd psychology, consumer knowledge, how people react, triggers. Not a psych, it can't be a psych degree. I think maybe that's too hardcore, but definitely a lot more understanding people and what they respond to, as well as learning how to write and create creative concepts. So I think start at the bottom, get the new guys coming in with a lot more sort of academic approach to advertising. The upper echelon guys, that is a hard thing to challenge. I don't know. That is going to have to come from within. And I think maybe networks, like agency networks, can, with the advent of them having training colleges and training courses within their networks, reintroduce those as well and try and get the guys on board with that.
But perhaps an immediate solution would be, and we come back to the point that we always come back to, but is better collaboration within what we do have at our skill sets within an agency right now. I've heard on a number of occasions, creatives speaking amongst themselves, creatives, let's call them that, speaking amongst artists with lucky strikes in their hands, speaking amongst themselves and saying, no one else in this agency would exist or get paid if the creative department didn't exist here. Perhaps there's a shift then to a different type of thinking where we have to work alongside our other departments in order to make the best creative solution that will actually turn into results.
And I think it's important at this point to reference the kind of stuff that Rory is actually doing internally to drive a shift in how people perceive creative work in the industry. Can we talk about that a bit?
Yeah, sure. So, something I started a few months ago is, it's a very creative name. It's This Week in Advertising. And what it is, and for all facts, it's a blog. But the blog doesn't just highlight really cool advertising, sort of like on a creative level. I'm also trying to find case studies that are maybe not going to be found in the creative field at the moment. How does a movie advertise its product to its consumers? It's not the bells and whistles and the sparkly glitz of Cannes, but it's a real hardworking, highly, highly, highly successful case studies of how things work. And when you start to see the process and how they got there, it's actually really, really fascinating. So advertising, I'm trying to find a blend between excitement, so like the big showy glitzy stuff, that it's fun to watch and to have 3 minutes of your life being entertained by it. And on the other hand, I'm trying to find products and case studies out there at the moment which are really actually taking a very considered approach as to how they are going to push what they push. Maybe not necessarily in the most sort of glammed up way, but in a way that really does the product justice. Yeah. So that's the one thing. And Aqua as a agency has brought in the Trinity, which is a great sort of move where the head of the creative department is no longer just the CD. It's a CD in partnership with strategy and client service. But what it means is that the decisions being made on the work going forward are going to be a lot more considered and not sort of focused on making film, but rather on well thought out, well structured, well strategized products, which I think is a good move.
And I think that for me, if you want to be a modern agency, we're talking about an agency that puts effectiveness over gimmicks, over visual, over this, what we see. And I think that in order for that to happen, there needs to be a view that what agencies do is not simply create creative work, but what they actually do is change and transform businesses. How do you do that? How do you do that strategically? How do you do that creatively? Those are questions that everyone should be orientating themselves around, because I think that especially in the world that we live in today, businesses are looking for solutions that are both marketing solutions and business solutions. And as creatives, we all have to kind of orientate as creative people in a creative industry, which I hate. I hate the idea that marketing is a creative industry, because it's much more than that.
Creative is one slice of the pie.
Yes,
And there are many, many slices.
And that I think is why I feel personally quite strongly that what we value as an agency needs to change big time.
100%.
Otherwise, we will become redundant. We will lose business, and we will not be a dynamic agency. And I think that's a dynamic business that uses marketing solutions to solve bigger problems and orientates themselves around consumers and what they need.
Well said.
So, Rory, I think it's been an awesome conversation.
Yeah.
I would like to ask you, just for your final thought, if there was one thing that you'd like to take out for Aqua and the Wonderman companies, as well as the broader industry, what would that be?
We need to take a step back as to how we view advertising and what it should be achieving. I think we need to be a lot more inclusive of our departments. So I think strategy, for instance, needs to have a lot more sort of say in how work is done, because currently it's sitting quite siloed in the industry. I mean, I know people talk about working together, but really having a strategist brief the creatives and come back 2 weeks later to see how it's happening, it's an old way. It's not really effective. They should literally be working in a brainstorming team together. And I think when it comes down to making the final product, like literally like about to go, do we write a radio ad or do we write a TV ad? It's actually at that point, assess what you have to achieve and then figure out what is the best solution to achieving it, as opposed to just rushing in and making what you want to make.
If people want to perhaps hear more about advertising and about you, where can they get hold of you?
So at this point, the advertising system is running on our internal platform that we have called the Inbox. So unfortunately, it's not available outside of Aqua just yet. It'll be a standalone blog soon, and people can come in and view what's happening and then maybe sort of give their suggestions and whatnot.
And you personally?
They can get hold of me on my Gmail. It's macrobert.rory@gmail.com. It's macrobert.rory@gmail.com. And if they want to be added to that list, I can add them and then get the mail on a weekly basis.
Thanks, Rory. And thank you for listening to the Braver Ideas podcast. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, or YouTube. And while you're there, give us a rating and a review.
For more awesome content and to subscribe to our e-newsletter, please visit the Brave Ideas blog, which you can find at aquaonline.com/Brave Ideas podcast. Also, if you want to get involved in the conversation, please do follow at Aqua Brave Ideas on Twitter or Brave Ideas Podcast on Instagram.
If you want to keep in touch with me, Dan, you can follow me at elhermo on Twitter and elhermo23 on Snapchat and Instagram. And you can get in touch with Esther.
You can email me at estherm@aquaonline.com.
Special thank you to Rory MacRobert, our guest. Thanks to Matt Klebanski for engineering and production. And thanks to Isaac and Matt Klebanski for the music. Thanks to Johan Boerter for the art direction. And thank you to our distribution team, Magesh Ramsamy, Kirsten Wiggle, Sabelo Kanide, Simon Bichers, and Helen Semenes.
That brings us to the end of the show. We'll leave you with one final thought. There are no original ideas, only original people.